morning, everybody. I just wanted to welcome you to this morning's coffee hour. This morning, we've got Garrett Stevens from Jefferson Conservation District and Gretchen Runing from Larimer Conservation District here to talk about forestry, their forestry programs, as well as a little bit about their experience with the RCPP, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. So, yeah, just to kick us off, would you two mind just talking about how you got started with the RCPP program?
Garrett, you got this. You're the lead on.
Okay.
I'll jump
I'll
in if I can.
I'll say a few things. So yeah, I think what interested us or caused us to look into RCPP was that um Gretchen's district and our district and Boulder Valley we had already been using like the annual EQIP program and its various fund pools on an annual basis to fund forestry projects, in part, it's partial funding, of course. And, a larger amount of money that's sort of guaranteed for a longer amount of time is always better. And so, yeah, we kind of always knew RCPP was out there, but I don't know, for whatever reason, last year we got the guts up to go ahead and apply. And yeah, I think each of our districts are hoping to treat somewhere around 300 to 500 acres per year for 5 years with the money. So yeah, we're basically kind of allocating a set amount of money to each district, and each of our districts, like I said, has a good track record of doing, planning and implementation that meets NRCS standards and specs for forestry. So I think we all felt really good about having to be a limited number of partners, but that knew how to get EQIP and NRCS funds rather onto the ground. So yeah, that's kind of the short version. Gretchen, anything to add?
Not really. I think I don't know. I think it's just like worth talking about a little bit about the history of, the forestry programs, probably. You know, I don't want to just like hop in here, but basically JCD kind of pioneered this like idea of ecological forest management in Colorado, I would say, like really focusing on that multi-resource benefit work. And since then, other conservation districts have taken on that model to leverage EQIP funding and NRCS funding against other, state and private funding sources to get really good, impactful work done on the ground. So it's a big paradigm shift from kind of the history of forest management in Colorado with, historically a big focus has been on fuel reduction treatments, so pretty light thinning. And kind of the tack that we take as conservation districts, at least on the Front Range, is really focusing on that multi-resource benefit work that benefits wildlife habitat, along with wildfire mitigation and all those other co-benefits that come along with managing the forest with fire in mind. So we can definitely dive into that more if anyone has more questions about that. But I think the reason I wanted to bring that up is that, at least in my mind, I think that's a big reason why the conservation districts on the Front Range have had success in, going for some of these big grant opportunities. So we've been able to kind of pair this multi-resource benefit work up across communities, tying together multiple landowners to build, large footprints to have this type of work done. And it's pretty unique in Colorado. So yeah, so I just wanted to share that. If anyone has any questions about that, I think it's worth, kind of touching on that, because I think that ties really well in with the intent behind RCPP and NRCS's conservation forestry work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
actually,
I'll
go ahead, Garrett.
just one other quick sort of logistical, well, not logistical. Anyway, um, yeah, I think we all know that NRCS and like conservation districts historically, their bread and butter has been like traditional agriculture, like farmers and ranchers, and forestry has not always been a significant part of that and has been handled by other agencies, if at all. I think one reason JCD got started on this, which it was started by Jonas Feinstein, who used to be a JCD employee, so that's a couple of people ago in terms of my position. But most of the time when NRCS or districts deliver a conservation plan to a farmer or rancher, they have the technical know-how, they know the people, they have the equipment, they know how to get seeding done and fencing and irrigation and all that sort of stuff. When you hand a conservation plan or a forest management plan to a forest landowner who lives up in the foothills, they are not a farmer. They're not a rancher. They don't know how to make the leap from plan to implementation. And that's the niche that our conservation districts has found success in terms of helping take that plan into implementation. And so by implementation, I mean we go out there and we really educate the landowner on here's what it looks like to get this work done. Here are the contractors that can do it. Here's the contractors that can't do it. Typically, because NRCS funding, whatever the funding pot may be, it's only partial funding, right? So more money has to be found in order to get the practices implemented. And so our districts write additional grants, like Gretchen said, to match against NRCS funding. So there's that big gap. And then our districts also hire and manage the contractors on the landowner's behalf. So that's especially important for multi-landowner projects so that the contractor has one boss. That's us. The landowners, which different again from farmers and ranchers, they don't have the know-how, the time, the energy, the whatever to be able to hold contractors to a standard and how to find them. So just wanted to sort of explain that niche that we have found.
Yeah, actually, and both of you brought up some interesting points that I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into. Maybe we'll just keep with you, Garrett, and how do you sell that to landowners? So I know that a forestry project is going to be expensive, and typically, as far as I know, there's not a lot of financial benefit as there would be if you're improving, rangeland or farmland. So how do you sell that to a landowner who, maybe doesn't want to spend that much money on or their portion of that contract?
Yeah, I mean most of the landowners we work with, I'd say it's an equal balance of them coming to us and us going to them, sort of in terms of the way we get connected with people. When we go to them, it's usually because we're trying to expand on an existing project and hit the surrounding neighbors. But anyway, people usually know, hey, there's problems with insects and disease in the forest, and more importantly, wildfire. So they know that they have some risks. So we basically go to them and say, hey, here's the ecological backstory. Here's why we have this problem. And so we need to get treatments on the ground that have some ecological integrity to them so that when the next forest fire or the next insect outbreak comes, the forest is going to be able to be resilient to it. It's going to be able to survive the disturbance, let it pass by, and you're still going to have some forest left over. You're also going to get sort of the secondary benefit of, reduced fire behavior is going to have positive impacts for reducing risk to homes and structures and that sort of thing. But primarily this is about having the forest resource, like that's the resource concern, having that forest survive the disturbance because we want those, natural resource benefits. And so it's a big, long process of, we usually do some sort of presentation, either virtual or in person, that kind of explains the whole ecological story and forest and fire history. And we take them to other active and past projects to show them what it's like. And then, of course, we come with money. Sometimes they know that, sometimes they don't. Usually we wind up finding funding, which is again a combination of usually NRCS funding is our first stop, but then we match it against other grants. We're usually finding like 80 to 90% of the funding to do the project. And that's because this work costs like $2,000 to $4,000 per acre. And so most of these landowners don't have that kind of cash, you know, so it's yeah, it's enticing to them if they don't have to take out a loan in order to do it. Because yeah, like you said, Garth, they're not really deriving the sort of tangible financial benefits that farmers and ranchers might from practice implementation.
I would just add, I think Garrett did a really good job kind of summing up some of the ecological pieces and, how the process there. Couple things that just popped to mind that I think is worth sharing. A lot of times this type of work is really emotional for people even thinking about. So I would just say that, aside from bringing the money, which is like, that's the green light for a lot of people that needs to be there to even think about moving forward. There's this whole relationship building piece that really, it's so important. And, I think a lot of the strength of the conservation districts is being able to kind of bridge the gap between the federal kind of systems that are really intimidating for a lot of landowners and, some of the more smaller nonprofits that might not have access to those federal funds. So I think, it's worth talking about that a little bit, how much time and effort goes into building those relationships with each individual landowner. And, I think, Garrett could definitely talk about this too, but every person we work with through our forestry programs comes at it from a slightly different, like, initial goal. And there's a lot of work that goes into, like, kind of developing what those goals look like and setting expectations around, okay, so your goal is wildlife habitat, here's what that looks like. Because it's really different a lot of times than what people initially come in thinking about. So that's a huge piece of the puzzle. And without those relationships, nothing else is successful, even if you have all the money in the world. So just wanted to put that out there. One big tool, and Garrett touched on it slightly, one big tool that we really like to use is taking people out to site visits. So seeing projects that have already been completed. And that helps kind of tell the ecological story, but it also helps with that expectation setting. We're learning every day, every year, how important that expectation setting is for having successful projects. Because, the reality is that when you bring heavy equipment onto people's properties, it can be really, really hard for them to watch trees come down, see like bare dirt on the ground or that sort of thing. So yeah, just wanted to add those two little pieces in.
And Gretchen, you had talked earlier as well about sort of the multi-benefit aspect of the programs. Maybe talk a little bit more about that and how you might approach a landowner trying to explain those to them.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, every forester has a slightly different approach, and every landowner, if you're doing it right, you're going to take a slightly different approach with each landowner. But generally it's coming in and like trying to get to know them before kind of trying to shove science down their throats, I would say. But most landowners come to us, like Garrett said, with usually it's, we have a bunch of dead trees on our property. Can you come clean them up? Or we're worried about wildfire. Can you come clean our forest and do like the minimum amount of work that you need to do to like change wildfire behavior? So we can work with that. That's not really the goal of our programs is a single one of those resource concerns, but we can work with that to help kind of talk about where the root of those problems come from. And a lot of time there's just a disconnect between like what our historical fire regime is in Colorado. The reality of that is that fires came through here really frequently before we started suppressing fires or overgrazing and that sort of thing. So usually when we start from that and build in this kind of like a recognition of what forests looked like before we started suppressing fires, it's really hard to unsee that. So we usually take people out and we do something called forensic forestry, which I really loved when I first started this job. And a lot of it is like going in and kind of pointing out where these old trees are on the landscape. You can spot them from a mile away, and you can start to kind of build out, like in your mind, a picture of what the structure of these forests were in some of these places. And usually once we get to that point, we can help landowners kind of recognize how shifted their forests are from that historical forest structure. And like if we're addressing the root of the problem, which is that forest structure has changed over time with the lack of fire, then you can start to build like a logical train to, if you address the root of the problem and you care about wildlife, you care about like wildfire mitigation, community safety, you've just got to build in from the root of the problem, and that's going to like meet all your goals along the way without kind of putting like contrived forest thinning on the landscape that might only meet one of those goals.
Very cool. And to kind of circle back to the RCPP discussion, how long ago did you guys start that program, and what were you doing before that? And kind of how did you ramp up to start this RCPP program?
I think we're still, I mean, it's not active right now for one thing. We are still in the agreement, like negotiation phase with NRCS state office. And so dang, Gretchen, when did we start having those conversations? It might have been like right around a year ago. Because I want to say it was.
They were due in August last year, weren't they, the proposals?
Yeah.
So yeah, probably around this time we started talking about, I mean, probably even earlier than that, we started talking about it, but then I think Garrett, you really like took the initiative to say like, let's just do this. Let's stop talking about it and let's just make this.
Yeah. I mean, it was sort of a leap of faith that, you're never totally fully prepared for any gigantic federal grant. So yeah, well, frankly, we knew it was kind of good timing because there was a lot of so many federal funding sources were just flush with money. So even though this is RCPP is nationally competitive, we thought we might have a good shot this year, last year.
One of the I guess one of the reasons that we started looking at RCPP in more earnest is that we previously, at least up in the Northern Front Range, we previously had a successful Joint Chiefs program and that's a partnership between the U.S. Forest Service and NRCS. So that got us through 3 years of really good dedicated funding. And then we had a couple of years of just not really being able to get past some differences with the Colorado State Forest Service and getting signatures on another proposal for that. So we kind of needed to look at a different avenue to get some dedicated federal funds that we could match and get more of our work done. So that was just full disclosure, that was a big push for us to go forward to RCPP.
Gotcha. What sorts of funding sources have you guys been using up until now?
I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but EQIP's always kind of our bread and butter. We're housed in NRCS offices and help administer those farm bill programs. So EQIP's always been a big part of how we initially fund projects. But like Garrett said, I mean, maybe when I first started, EQIP funded more like 70% of the work. And these days we're lucky if it even funds like 50% of the work in some of the places that we work. So equip has pretty much always had to be paired with other funds to get these projects done. So some of the sources that we've used are the Colorado State Forest Service has the furworm program, forest restoration, and wildfire risk mitigation grant. There's several other like state grants now that are available. State DNR recently started the Coast Hop program that has funded some of our work up here. We work with municipalities a lot, so cities often like to fund this, like city water utilities. We work with Northern Water Conservancy District a fair bit in the Big Thompson watershed. And I know, that's very regional, but, water utilities have a big interest in source water protection. And then just some other private funding sources that are more local that might use funds from investors and that sort of thing that have an interest in, usually it's tied to water quality. So.
Yep, nothing to add there.
All right. I know both of your districts utilize the DCT program a lot, the District Conservation Technicians. Can you talk about that and how that's been working for you, how you've used DCTs to build your programs at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a backbone of our program. It would probably be very difficult to operate these programs without it. And it would probably just take us a lot more time to find other outside grants and funding sources to cobble together the money it takes to pull off a project. I did some math a long time ago and discovered that it can take us anywhere from like 3 to 7 hours per acre to pull off a forestry project. That's from very beginning, like meeting the landowner, all the way till the last log truck leaves the property. And as the property size goes down, properties get smaller, our time goes up because landowners with smaller properties have a lot more preferences and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, the DCT definitely enables us to spend more time, and pretty much everything we're doing with planning and implementation of a forestry project qualifies under DCT time. So we don't really think of it as, okay, 80% of the time is going to be spent on like farm bill stuff, and then 20% is going to be on quote district stuff. When it comes to doing these forestry projects, 100% of our foresters' time is spent on technical things that have some nexus with farm bill activities. You're, planning or implementation stage. We have other staff members who are handling like invoicing and paying the contractors and contracts and stuff like that. That is not connected to like the technical aspects of doing a forestry project. But yeah, DCT is great. We hope it lives forever. Yeah, super important part of our program.
Very cool. What sort of advice would you give to another conservation district who does not currently have a forestry program, or maybe just the very beginnings of a forestry program? What sort of advice would you give to them for how to get started with building up their program and basically doing more or less what you guys are doing?
I can hop in here just for a second. I'm sure Garrett will have stuff to add, but one thing, just coming from a conservation district that started our program several years after JCD started their program, it's very helpful to have a mentor or another organization to lean on to help answer some of those questions. We've been through you know, a decade plus at this point of learning opportunities, put it that way, of how to make these programs as successful as they can be. And, you know, I'll just say we're still learning things every day of how we can improve and make our programs more successful, both for the watersheds and for our landowners and just internal to our organizations. So my biggest piece of advice would be, you know, take what already exists, like don't reinvent the wheel, and form it to work in your region or with your landowners, your base there, that you're planning on working with. There's a lot of resources out there, so, you know, don't feel like you're alone in developing, you know, landowner expectations documents or, you know, pamphlets and that sort of thing. There's a lot to draw on, and a lot of advice to be had from experienced conservation districts that might be dealing with a lot of similar challenges.
Yeah, I'll add that, you know, conservation district culture at large is not always known for being like progressive and open-minded and kind of stepping outside the box and doing something different than what's been done for the last 80 years. And certainly stepping into the forestry space as opposed to traditional ag, like that's one important first step. So you definitely need a board who's willing to recognize, like, hey, yeah, there's other resource concerns out there that our district could be addressing. For JCD, it was kind of simple because we're Jefferson County and we lost our ag lands to, you know, Arvada and Wheat Ridge and Lakewood like a long time ago. And so we had to shift to something else or, you know, become irrelevant. And so for us, it was after like the Buffalo Creek fire and the Hayman fire, like in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's also when NRCS started paying for forestry practices. So that's when JCD really took a hard look at forestry. You know, again, like I know conservation districts are generally pretty nimble, you know, as opposed to other larger government agencies. And so, you know, we saw the gap, like I said, between delivery of a forest management plan and implementation. And so I think that's a niche districts hold like for all sorts of resource concerns across the country, you know, not just forestry. But I feel like in Colorado, it's especially important because especially for that additional grant writing piece, like helping to find the needed money to do the project. So, you know, districts, it seems, are always, you know, looking for ways like how can we add staff? How can we get money? How can we, you know, whatever. And I think this is one of those ways. And there's, you know, proof of concept with several districts in the state already. So yeah, like Gretchen said, we're more than happy to take visitors, and you know, Manka sent some people up here last year, and like there's a lot we can handle over the phone too. You know, so happy to do like Zoom presentations to boards or staff members on how to get things started. But yeah, I think there is often I see there's often a need sort of among local partners in like, hey, who can be the fiscal agent for this grant? Who can take this thing on? Who can be the coordinating partner for some collaborative? And again, conservation districts are nimble and we can make decisions easily and quickly. And so that's a great opportunity to just kind of raise your hand and figure it out as you go, because other organizations are too slow or bureaucratic, or you know, being a pass through of grant funds is not an easy thing to do. So yeah, we're doing that here with this RCPP. We're doing that with a couple of DNR co-swap grants, being the fiscal agent for our projects as well as other partners. We got a FEMA grant, we got America the Beautiful. So yeah, just being a coordinating partner, if for no other reason than to pass through money, like that can be an easy first step. If you don't actually have forester capacity, but you can help, be a grant administrator, that's definitely a needed role.
Garrett, I think Danny from Ancus had a question. He just wanted to revisit how many hours from start to finish were you saying per acre on
Oh,
the project?
yeah, it's been like as low as 2 to 3 and as high as 7 or 8.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
What has been maybe the biggest or most memorable challenge, pitfall, setback, mistake that you guys have encountered along the way?
Where to
Sorry,
begin?
Garrett.
You go for it, Gretchen, and then I'll add 12 more.
Okay, biggest challenges and pitfalls. Man, okay, there's just so many things, but it's also like, I don't want to make this sound like a negative thing, because I'm just really impressed with everyone's abilities here, like in conservation district world, to rise to challenges and find solutions. So I'll just say that like everything I mentioned is something that like there's a solution to, and it just takes time and effort and those relationships. So a really big one in Colorado, cost per acre, obviously, that's been a huge challenge. There's really not much of a wood products market out here, and especially when you compare it to places in like the Midwest or the South or even the Pacific Northwest. So justifying this work when there's no real like tangible wood products to speak of to help pay for those costs to get the wood out of the woods is challenging for a lot of people. But it also presents an opportunity, and we can really focus more on the ecological side of things when there's less of an impetus to like capitalize on wood products. So with that challenge comes other challenges that are connected to it. So as mills have closed down over the last 100 years or so, it's been harder to offload wood products from the woods. So lots of challenges around like, what do we do with the wood that comes out of the forest? Particularly the non-merchantable wood products. So tops and limbs are always a challenge of these trees. They're expensive to get out of there and pretty hard to find a good market for them. So there's a lot of creative solutions out there that I think a lot of people way smarter than myself are working on. But one place that conservation districts have come in is helping to develop some of these smaller contractors and build out their kind of business sense around this work and help plug them in with other opportunities for offloading wood products and learning how to use equipment and just kind of building their capacities. There's a lot of kind of bottlenecks around contractor availability too because of this. So right now in Larimer County, I think LCD has every single contractor available tied up in a project. So, there's a lot that goes into keeping these guys busy, but then once you keep them busy, you're kind of, that's your bottleneck. You can only treat so many acres a year because of contractor availability. I guess some other ones, and we can dive into this as much as people want, but already mentioned setting expectations with landowners. When you get so far down the road with landowners and then for whatever reason they back out of a project, that can be really, really tough from a grant perspective, from you've already got a logger on site maybe, so you've got a contract there. It's really case by case on how you navigate that. So that's something that we're putting a huge focus in this year, is really dialing in how we communicate expectations to landowners. Because we'd rather them not sign up unless they, you know, are fully bought into the project. And so we really want to make sure that it's a good partnership before we move forward with that. So that's two, and I'll let Garrett pop in with some more.
Yeah, and I mean, expectation setting is one thing I wrote down here, and that's something that Gretchen and I can literally like email you the long checklist of things that needs to be done in like the 6 to 12 month planning and education period with a landowner. Because there's a ton of details where you need to be like, okay, landowner, you need to be aware of this, you need to know this, you need to, you know, suck it up and not complain about this. Know that it's gonna happen. You're not gonna like it. It's good if people have landowners have like a construction project mentality where there's gonna be lots of ruts and exposed soil and stuff for a while, just like building a house. And you know, it's so anyway, yeah, expectation setting is probably the most important thing. I would also say that, you know, the foresters that are educating the landowners, laying out the projects on the ground and managing the contractors, all of that can be taught. And for the most part, the foresters that JCD has hired to do it, we're not doing this type of work prior to it. You know, others, people might have had more sort of general ecological or natural resource degrees, and it's definitely helpful if somebody has that kind of education and background in natural resources more broadly. But again, it can all be taught, but it is really important that somebody knows the whole process. I mean, down to like, hey, what type of equipment can be used on this given property? I mean, that's kind of one of the first things we do before we'll even start educating a landowner. You got to have somebody who can go out there and assess the land and say, yeah, is the project even feasible? Because so many times landowner looks at a dense hillside and even other resource professionals and they're like, yeah, it looks like we need to do some treatments there. So then they go get a grant and they get the money and they don't actually know, like, okay, where's the landing going to be? Where's the skid trails? Where can we get log trucks in? Like all that sort of stuff. So having that technical knowledge of forest management and logging operations is critically important. Like if you don't have that, I would be very cautious of going after money. But again, totally something that can be taught. And that goes for knowing what type of contractors are right. There's kind of two classes of them in Colorado. There's your defensible space contractors, and then there's your logging contractors. And then there's some who kind of try to keep a toe in both worlds, but depending on the size and the number of trees that you're going to be harvesting, yeah, you need to know what the right type of contractor is. And usually it's the true logging contractors who have the ability to get rid of the wood. They have the equipment, they have the efficiencies, and they have the economy of scale. Like logging contractors are going to charge, you know, 2,000, 3,000, or maybe a little more an acre, you know, for a 40-acre project or more. The defensible space guys, they're charging like 5,000 to 8,000 or 10,000 per acre. But that's just because their equipment is designed for small projects. They're not handling a lot of volume. And so for them to try to bite off something that's 40 acres or more, they're still going to be coming in around that really high, you know, 5,000 to 10,000 an acre mark. They can do the work, like physically it can get done, but it's just being done so inefficiently. You know, it's like building a house with a hammer and a screwdriver versus power tools and machines. Yeah, you can do it, but it's going to take you a lot longer and it's going to be more expensive in the end because you're not using the most efficient methods. So, dang, I'll stop there, but I could go on.
All right, I do want to give a little bit of time for folks to other folks on the call to answer or to ask any questions, but real quick, so while you guys are thinking of your questions, where are you going to go from here?
Well, we got a bunch of RCPP money to spend, so we're going to be doing this for the next 5 years. JCD just added 2 foresters, so we have 4 foresters now. In part to help utilize the RCPP money, and some other grants. So yeah, I mean, at least on the Front Range, which I know there's a lot of money and energy and activity pouring into the Front Range. There is still no shortage of this type of work. Like, short of our landscape, burning up, there is no shortage of forest management work to do for the next, 10 to 15 years easily. So if we could keep this model going before it burns up, that would be great. I know Gretchen has faced a lot of big fires up there in Larimer recently, but I'm sure there's more work up there. So yeah, we're going to continue going. We're not going to grow as a staff at JCD for a while. We're going to sit tight for a few years and figure out what it's like to have four foresters. And JCD's trying to hit a steady 500 acres treated per year mark, and we think we can do that with the funding that we have right now. But a lot of it comes down to parcel size, and contractor availability. So we're not entirely in control of how many acres we can do a year, but we're shooting for 500.
Yeah, I think we're heading in a really similar direction to JCD. I think we've kind of gone through our growth phase over the last 6 or 8 years, and our carrying capacity is where we're sitting right now in terms of contractor availability, and we're sitting at about 500 to 700 acres a year is what we're treating with. 500 is a good goal, like what Garrett said, for us and what we have in terms of our capacity in Larimer County. So yeah, a couple things. We have 4 foresters as well. I think that's a good number for us for where we're sitting. We are going to be we're bringing on a seasonal technician this summer just to help with field work and help us get ahead a little bit. Since I started with the conservation district, we've been behind on field work every single year. So we're really looking forward to maybe getting a little bit ahead of the game this year. In terms of direction, we're just sitting where we are with the forestry program, but trying to kind of incorporate some other holistic management stuff into our watershed health programs. So this year we hired 2 folks to help us run a watershed restoration program to kind of tie in with that forestry work. So we'll be doing, for those of you who may or may not be familiar, we'll be doing low-tech process-based restoration in stream work. And we have several projects lined up for that that we're going to be kicking off this year. So we're really excited about how that ties in with the forestry work when we're thinking about whole watershed health and future wildfire events and how we hold sediment in place in the mountains and help build more wildlife habitat across different ecosystems. So we're excited about that, and then trying to incorporate more and more noxious weed management into our forestry work as we go, and doing a little bit more in terms of cheatgrass management this year than we have in past years. So hopefully that that paired with some of the NRCS work with grazing management, we can kind of take all the boxes in some of our upper watersheds.
Thank you, Gretchen and Garrett. Penny Bishop from Chavano had a question. Can you utilize the RCPP funding to pay for your foresters' wages? And if you're not doing that, where are you getting the funding for them? Oh, it looks like Garrett answered. Sorry, Garrett. So.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I can elaborate. So RCPP, it's sort of murky, might be year to year on how much match they want you to provide. We brought 25% match to the grant just to try to increase its competitiveness. But of the award portion, the portion in our case it was 75%. In the award portion that NRCS will pay for through RCPP, they break that amount down into a 75%, 25% split. 75% goes to FA in NRCS lingo, which is financial assistance. So that is money to pay for practice implementation. So paying contractors to get this work done on the ground. 25% of the award is TA or technical assistance. So that is paying for people like us to plan the projects and lay them out and check in on the contractors and that sort of thing. So yes, RCPP will pay for wages.
Great. And I think Vanessa Trout with White River Conservation District has a couple of questions as well.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay. So I just we're based in Meeker, and I just started like about a month or so ago. So really just getting into the whole project. The Conservation District and the White River Initiative created a scope of work for upland vegetation management within specific priority areas. So that, like, my position is funded through a furworm grant and NRCS. So in just kind of diving into it, you know, the scope of work is fuels mitigation to protect the watersheds. And so we already have, I've already been talking with the USFS guy here, and he has a whole plan for fuels mitigation in the federal area. But then there's, of course, that private landowner aspect that butts up against that federal land. So one part of the project is, you know, dealing with these landowners. And so we're just kind of on the cusp of doing that. And so I had a question based on what you guys said earlier. Gretchen, you were mentioning building relationships with landowners was really important. So we're going to have a public meeting in the next month. I asked Frank to speak as well with that, but to all the landowners to just say, like, this is the deal, you know, do you guys want to be involved? Do you want to do some work on your property? But my question is, and all of this could be sidebar stuff at another meeting if the 11 participants, you know, don't want to, or you know, don't need to know this or want to hear it. But so the question is, like, how do you, this is so basic, but so there's a group of homes, right? And like houses, and I wrote down like 2 pages, like I went through our county satellite map and clicked through everyone and wrote down who lives in these houses or who owns these properties. It's like, how do you call them and say, hey, you want to come to this meeting? Or like, how do I get there outside and knocking on their door and assuming this is like their 5th house, so they're not even there? But how do you get their information to even be in touch with them to get them to come to a meeting? That was my first question.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, like when we kind of built our programs, we were relying off existing relationships through like our NRCS office to kind of kickstart the process for forest landowners and kind of build some demonstration sites and that sort of thing before we started really trying to, you know, actively reach out to people in specific priority areas. Because essentially what you're doing is cold calling, which is really hard. And
right,
you know, word of mouth is definitely easier, but it's not impossible to do the cold calling thing. Just like, I don't know if this is your question, but you know, how we get information about people's contact information is usually either through like an HOA association, or you know, like your county assessor website should have at least mailing addresses. So like I have reached out to people in more of that way of, you know, hey, you're in this priority area. we're looking to expand our treatment footprint. And that's been more in the form of like a letter. I sent them a letter, like a mailer to start.
Oh,
with
gotcha.
some basic information and, you know, actually they usually respond, you know, hey, just want to learn more and maybe we could set up a site visit, but it doesn't, you know, I think just starting off with like, hey, we just want to start the conversation rather than like, we're doing work here, you know, goes a lot further to like start to build that trust so they feel like they're part of the initial planning process and like more bought in along the way.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Did that answer your question? I'm not sure if it
Yeah,
did.
totally. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. I mean, I know, you know, some of those people up there that could, maybe they know some of the other homeowners. So, but I think the county assessor, that was kind of what I was wanting to really get at, was like, is that legal to ask them for their contact details?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's public information. And, you know, if
Okay.
you do have contacts within the community, that's often your best bet, is working with an existing like champion in the community that
Gotcha.
kind of knows people and can help spread the word in like a less threatening way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry. Can I add one thing too? Yeah, like Gretchen said, like neighbors are like the best way to get a door opened to another neighbor. When it comes to some outside organization or entity, the fire district is probably the next most trusted source or trusted government entity, so they may know those people. But then, yeah, any other community organizations, like figure out what other community organizations might be operating in that area. May or may not be natural resource related. But yeah, if you can have somebody open the door, that's best case scenario. But if, you know, worst case, you're kind of sending them a cold letter because you got their mailing address off the assessor website.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. My second question kind of goes along with like the EQIP program. So there's different pockets of priority areas, and then there's homes within those priority areas. And so my question is, would it be better to, if they all agree to do work, right, on their own private land, is it better to address them separately for work with their own land and get like an EQIP program going for each person? Or is it better to say group them all together with like a firmworm grant and put out bids to loggers or like you said, defensible space contractors to do the work on all of them as a group? Like what is your experience with that, if any? Or are those two options, or are there others, I guess?
No, that's a good question. I think you're thinking about it totally the right way. For EQIP, it has to be, they have to apply by each individual landowner. So it's kind of a question mark for you of, you know, if you're familiar with the EQIP process, or even if you're not, it's a pretty big administrative burden. So, you know, we try to be pretty tactical about who we're gonna manage through EQIP. Anyone can apply for EQIP, but who we're gonna take on is like for project management. So we try to do EQIP for bigger landowners. So, you know, 20+ acres is usually our cutoff. And then what we do then is we'll apply for a firmworm grant or something similar. We'll just say firmworm for now, for a block of landowners. So say you're working in one HOA, you have particular landowners that make sense for you, apply for EQIP, and then you can use that as match to leverage state funds. And then from there, once you get the firmworm funding, then what you can do is, since you're the project manager, if you're running it that way, you can put the whole project out for bid for one contractor, which gives you that economy of scale and makes your administrative burden way less. But
so if you do get a firmworm grant, then the other 50% could be like the homeowner's work that they do, right? Because isn't firmworm like a 50% match?
Yeah, it's 50% unless you're in some like disadvantaged communities, and then you can get 25% match. But yeah, you can use all sorts of things as match. You can use homeowner labor. What we usually do is we use logging invoices as match. So we'll ask for 50% reimbursement on those logging invoices.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Okay. And my last question, and thanks for your time. So we, as the conservation district, we don't have a forester here in our area or in Meeker. And so if we don't have access to a forester to write those management plans, what is our option? That was one question. Can we steal some of yours? Garrett, you said you had 4 of them. Just kidding. But I understand there's also one in Grand Junction. And so I didn't know, like, his area, what area does he cover? Like, could we get him to come over to our county and help us write these management plans?
Yeah, I think there's several options for sort of crowdsourcing the help. The you know the I don't know how interested the local U.S. Forest Service, forester or timber or fuels person would be to coming out and sort of assessing that initial feasibility. Like, what does the terrain and access look like first off? In terms of writing the forest management plan, the part where you need people on the ground the most after you've determined that a project is possible is doing the inventory. And so I think that can be crowdsourced from other NRCS or conservation district folks. I mean, maybe if it's kind of a big collection of properties that are interested, like Gretchen and I could probably send out people for a long day or a long day or two to knock out a bunch of that and sort of do some informal training as well. So yeah, don't let the if you've got interested landowners, we all can support you on the rest. Don't let that scare you off the FMP writing.
Okay.
The FMP writing, and Frank would probably shoot me if I said this, but in some ways it's a formality to document, yes, the forest has a problem and here is what we're going to do with it. So the FMP writing is definitely not the hard part of doing these projects. It's knowing that it's possible and then knowing how to execute.
Okay. That's good to know. What happens though if they do decide to go through the equip process and then they don't get it because of the fund pool decisions? So they go through that whole equip thing and then end up not getting it.
Yeah, they should stay in there, stay on deck for the next year, because that's entirely possible. That's happened to Gretchen and I. But it would be helpful to talk with your DC or RTL and say, hey, what fund pools do we think we're going to be eligible for? We've got 5 landowners. If we treat all the acres we could, it could cost, $600,000, in terms of the money we're looking for from EQIP, and see what fund pools they think are available. Like you definitely want to have an NRCS, DC or RTL who's aware of the project and is supportive of it and has some fund pool ideas in mind, whether that's from the resource team fund pool or the wildlife fund pool. Source water, I don't know. Like, dang, this last sign up year like exploded all the fund pools and everything was so crazy. So I don't know what it's going to look like next year. But yeah, start some conversations with your DC and our NRCS folks and district folks on the Front Range can talk to you all too, and we can have a Zoom meeting and talk about this funding stuff too.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate all of your answers and questions.
Yeah, hey Vanessa, just real quick, we should take this offline because I think we're up against time, but if you have a good relationship with your US Forest Service office too, there's some opportunities there potentially with conservation districts in terms of specifically like special agreements or good neighbor authority is something that conservation districts have access to. So it would take, you know, a champion at the Forest Service to want to push that through, but that's another good way to secure some federal funding for your work that can be done on private land too. So if you're
Awesome.
doing cross-boundary work, that's a great thing to explore.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks for the great discussion, guys. We are at the top of the hour, so I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. But Gretchen, Garrett, thank you both so much for being here and answering questions, and hopefully we'll see a lot more forestry projects around the state with conservation districts. I do believe I heard that you guys were open to having discussions with folks. So if it's okay with you, I can share your contact information via email with the districts and let them know that you're available to chat if that's all right with you. All right. Great. Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you at the next coffee hour. Y'all have a good day.